Hello and welcome back, guys. We're now starting a new story, The Devil Fruit Pirate. By Camdog 2. You can find author's profile link in the description. Let's begin. The Devil Fruit hero. Today was not a good day for Izuku Midoriya and the other members of Class 1A who had just went through, and emerged victorious from a surprise attack that was orchestrated by a group calling themselves the League of Villains. The fighting was tough and everyone had suffered their fair share of injuries, none more so than their teachers 13 and Shota Aizawa, otherwise known as Eraserhead. In the end, though, it didn't matter, they had won, and with everyone surviving in the end, with the only villains that managed to get away were Tamura Shigaraki and Kurogiri. Right now though, the class was simply waiting for the rest of the teachers to show up and help them take down the barrier, and although the students had mixed feelings about their teachers right now, they were quite frankly glad it was over. Or so they thought. Izuku's haki flared to life as he jumped to his feet and rushed over to where Ochiko Uraraka and Tsuyu Azui chatting. "Hey Izuku, what's wrong?" Ochiko asked before her eyes widened when a familiar black mist appeared right behind them. "This is..." Tsuyu said before being grabbed by Izuku and out of the way as the other students either got into fighting positions or out of the way of those who were going to fight. "Greetings once again." Kurogiri spoke this time, pulling himself together into a humanoid form while also holding what looks like a syringe in his hands. "So sorry to show up so soon after our last meeting, however, due to some unforeseen complications," he said, looking at Izuku as he did so. "My MSTR sent me here to ensure those complications don't meddle in our future plans," he said, getting a snort from Izuku. "And just how do you plan on doing that?" he asked with crossed arms while the mist villain chuckled. "With this," he said simply before stabbing the needle into his neck before spazzing rapidly and stumbling for a few seconds before the drag activated. The effects were instantly noticeable as Kurogiri became a hurricane of mist, blowing some of the students back while Mizo and Rikido guarded the teachers while ignoring their orders to help them up. Kurogiri laughed as he saw how strong his quirk had become. "Trigger truly is wondrous thing," he thought before turning his attention to Izuku, who had narrowed his eyes at the mist villain. "Now on to business, DMN it. What do we do now?" Katsuki Bakugu asked, trying to think of a way out of this mess before noticing Izuku charging forward, his hands covered in darkness, his intention obvious. "Don't be an idiot, Deku." He tried to warn, but it was too late, because the second he was able to come in contact with Kurogiri and take away his quirk, Izuku was engulfed in Kurogiri's quirk and vanished. It was silent as a grave as the class processed what just happened, and the silence was broken by the mist villain himself. "Well, that's him out of the way. Line break, DMN it, what was I thinking, cheering in like an idiot." Izuku berated himself as he tried to make heads or tails of where the mist could be taking him. "To the bottom of the ocean for all I know," he thought, with sweat dripping down his face as he prepared for the worst. Which is why it came as shock when he found himself at a coastline where a pool was linked to the ocean by a closed steel gates. The place, while it did look vaguely familiar, couldn't have been anywhere near Japan, since it was mid-afternoon in Japan and it was the dead of night here. However, before he could look around, a deep voice full of mock and loathing spoke up. "Oi, human, just what the hell are you doing at my base?" Izuku froze as he heard the voice, not in fear but in shock, as he had remembered hearing that voice before in his dreams. "It can't be," Izuku thought as he slowly turned around to see who was talking and prove he wasn't who he thought he was, only for a single to enter his mind when he saw who spoke. "It is," he thought as stared at the figure in front of him. "You're Arlong the Saw." Izuku spoke in disbelief before looking around quickly. "This is Arlong Park," he said as he took in the fishman's main base behind while noticing that various fishermen were slowly surrounding them. Arlong meanwhile smirked in arrogance and superiority as he took Izuku's disbelief for fear. "So you've heard of me, glad to see my name is becoming well known. But seeing as you're new here and seem to have no way of this island that makes you a citizen here, meaning you owe me some money," he said as he gripped Izuku's shoulders in an attempt to scare the teen. This snapped Izuku out of his daze and finally let it sink in that this was Arlong the Saw. Call what happened next a lapse in judgment on Izuku's part, but after all the CRP Izuku's been through today, being stuck in another world, albeit one he knows very well, and the fact he was being hassled by some like this, he felt his next action justified. Now, seeing as this is your first time, I'll you off with a mirror. Arlong was cut off from whatever he was going to say next as he found. This BSTRD hit me harder than when Jinbi did. He thought enraged at that this inferior human would dare strike him before looking up at him with a glare. You worthless dash. Bam, naturally his crew didn't take this well. That BSTRD human. How dare you, you'll pay for what did. And soon Izuku found himself being charged by close to 40 fishmen, to which Izuku only scoffed at before lighting coated his arms before firing lightning bolts at the fishmen, with each bolt electrocuting every fishman they hit before continuing on to the next until all were on the ground fried to crisps. Izuku's haki activated, and he absent-mindedly activated the dice fruit to block 6 swords suddenly coming from him as he looked at octopus fishmen in front of him. Hat-chan, he noticed seeing the actual kind fishman before noticing his confused look. What the swordsman said, however, made Izuku want to kick his own dumbass. You have 2 devil fruits. He asked, since as far as anyone knew if you ate more than one you died. Izuku meanwhile cursed himself for his own stupidity. Of course he would ask that, you dumbass. Having more than one power is unheard of. He snarled to himself before making such a stupid mistake before trying to clear his head. I can worry about that later, right now I've got bigger problems. Excuse me, I asked you a question. Hat-chan said, however the only response he got was an 20% OFA punch, sending the octopus fishman through the wall and into unconsciousness. Sorry, Hat-chan. He thought before noticing 2 more figures appear. One was muscular, blue skin and had lips. He had a Arlong tattoo on his right shoulder. He was wearing a necklace, striped blue vest, dark brown leather pants and sandals. Next to him was a manta ray fishman that wore a traditional martial artist with a dark blue GI, black belt and his hair tied up in a ponytail. This was Chu and Kurubi. I can't believe some worthless human was able to take down so many of our brothers. Though he seemingly has managed to eat 2 devil fruits, so I guess miracles can happen. Chu said, staring lazy at Izuku. Doesn't matter, this ends now. Kurubi declared, glaring at the team before rushing forward to attack. 100-tile true punch. He declared his attack, hitting Izuku right in the cheek with the manta ray fishman grinned, waiting to see this sum's head fly clean off his body. Only for that to never happen, as pain exploded in Kurubi's fist, causing him to clutch his hand and look at the human, only for his eyes to widen when he saw black shine exactly where he had punched him. Haki 2. He questioned himself only to notice Izuku's palm extended and pointed towards him. Anything else? The teen questioned, getting nothing but stunned silence in return. Didn't think so. Izuku revealed before Kurubi was engulfed in lighting and fell to the ground unconscious when the attack ended. Izuku stared at the martial artist before slowly turning to a shaking Chu. Whether he was shaking from fear or anger Izuku didn't know. So you next? He asked simply, and this seemed to strike a nerve as Chu managed to stop shaking and took a step forward. Your DMN right, him next. And don't think I'll go down as easy as the dash. He didn't get any further as he was cut down thanks to a storm leg from Izuku getting out one last week, Chu, before joining his brothers in unconsciousness. Seeing Chu go down, Izuku finally allowed himself to breathe as he moved his way to Arlong's castle. Izuku knew he really shouldn't be doing this, that because of his actions he could throw so many things into danger, but he couldn't help it. Arlong was a monster and Izuku was there and easily had the strength to stop him, and with those factors in mind he could just walk away. Finally he arrived right at the base of the building. Well, in for a penny, in for a PND, he muttered to himself as he raised his index finger, electricity gathering around it before he jerked it down, causing a massive lightning bolt to strike the building, instantly setting it aflame. It was silent for a few minutes as Izuku watched the fire destroy the building, and it had just collapsed when he heard a low animalistic growl from behind him. UBSTRD. Turning back he watched calmly as Arlong stumbled to his feet, his injuries and anger making it hard for him to get his footing. Do you have any idea of what you cost me? At Izuku's silence, the fishman seemed to have lost the last of his patience. 10 years. 10 long years of money collecting wasted. Arlong roared, causing Izuku's eyes to widen. It was only supposed to be 8 years, so why is he saying 10? But the absolute worst thing you cost me were my maps. Maps I was going to use to take over the East Blue. He roared in absolute fury. All that work my map maker did, wasted. He snarled, giving Izuku a truly animalistic glare. I hope you're happy, boy, because after I kill you I'm going to go get my map maker and kill everyone in that precious village of hers. He declared, truly losing all sense. Never noticing Izuku's ice-cold look. Then I guess I have to make sure you never move again. He declared before slowly walking towards the pirate captain, using one of his size-based devil fruit to grow to 10 feet until he was right in front of him. Another one. Arlong questioned, having heard his brother shout something about the human having multiple devil fruits before passing out. Izuku didn't say a word as he grabbed Arlong's shoulders and began to push down, causing Arlong to fall to his knees as Izuku kept pushing. It was then that Arlong knew what Izuku was trying to do. He's trying to break my spine. The fishman, though, in horror. Hey, we can talk about this. You look like a reasonable man. We can work something out. We can be partners. He tried as he gripped Izuku's arm to try and remove them, only for Izuku to keep pushing as Arlong could feel his spine getting to the literal breaking point. Please, I'm sorry. I'll stop the killings, stop the taxes. I'll leave and never come back. He pleaded, all pride and anger completely gone and now replaced with the longing to just being able to get out of this alive. Crack! Arlong's arms fell limp and his eyes rolled into the back of his head as his spine shattered, while Izuku finally let go, allowing Arlong to fall limp, likely never being able to never walk again. Izuku did nothing but stare at the broken pirate in front of him, a million thoughts going through his head now, especially the 2-year difference in the timeline. Finally he sighed before dusting himself off before standing up and turning around. Only to come face to face with the residents of Kokoyashi village, who seemed to be in a trance at what they were seeing. The fishmen who had killed, pillaged and terrorized their islands for the last decade were laying sprawled and defeated, their headquarters lay in ruin, and Arlong had been reduced a sobbing, begging mess before being crippled for life. This is really happening, right? This isn't some cruel joke, right? Or a mass hallucination everyone's having, right? An older pleaded rather desperately. He was an elderly man with wrinkles, gray hair, gray eyebrows and a gray mustache and goatee. He wears a bandana with a red cross and sunglasses. He wore a striped light green and dark green shirt. Under a doctor's coat with a red cross on the right sleeve. I think it is Neko. A man said shakily besides him. He was a man covered in scars and had a mustache. He was wearing a short-sleeved police uniform and short pants with a pinwheel on top of his hat. At this the other villagers seemed to finally come out their stupor as grins slowly but surely appeared on their faces as they were able to finally accept what they were seeing. Arlong Park is gone. The fishmen have defeated, we are free. The villagers shouted, tears in their eyes at the fact their nightmare was finally over. Is it true? Have they really been defeated? A voice questioned hesitantly but brimming with hope as 2 women approached. The first was an average-sized woman with light blue hair and tan skin, and her right arm and chest were heavily tattooed. She had a beige sleeveless shirt with blue trousers and purple sandals. She also appeared to wear pink lip gloss. However, it was the second woman that instantly stood out to him, as he had seen her many times through many perspectives, and although she's older than she should be, he would know her anywhere. Nami. He thought as he gazed upon the cat burglar herself. Nami meanwhile was soaking in everything that she was seeing as she looked at the seemingly invisible fishmen lay defeated seemingly by one person. Slowly she approached Izuku, who was looking at her weirdly. Probably noticed the Arlong tattoo. She reasoned in her mind as she continued to approach him until she was standing right in front of him. You're the one who beat the fishmen, right? She questioned, with Izuku nodding to confirm it. She turned to the villagers and they simply nodded except the blue-haired woman who turned away to hide her tears. I see then, Nami whispered quietly. In that case. Izuku got no warning as he soon found himself in a tight embrace, and when he looked down he saw her face flooded with tears. Thank you. She cried with everything she had, only tightening the embrace. This seemed to relight the joy in everyone's heart as their cheers and tears returned tenfold as the islanders either ran to spread the word, hugged either other, or ran to hug their savior. Izuku wanted to say that wasn't necessary, but he didn't want to ruin the mood, so he quickly created clones to gather, detain and hold the fishmen until they could be handed over to Marines. Proper Marines, Izuku noted as he was led of the villagers, Nami never leaving his side. Line break. In all honesty, Izuku could tell you what happened the next 3 days as he wandered around Kokoyashi village eating, sleeping and meeting and be thanked from everyone on the Konomi Islands. Izuku also had a lot of time to think of what to do about finding a way to get back home. His first thought was to actually go and try to find Dr. Vegapunk, the leading scientist of the world, and see if he could help get Izuku home. However, that did have risks and problems of their own. The first being he actually would have to find the scientist. Now one would think that with the memories of every devil fruit user from the world, Izuku would be able to find the scientist. However, the memories also proved Vegapunk moved a lot, not to mention Izuku was still uneasy about the 2-year. Call it being paranoid, but if that's different, then who knows what else is different. The next problem would be the government itself. Izuku was pretty sure that if he could find Vegapunk he could strike a deal with him. Such as letting the scientist run a few tests on him in exchange for his help. However, the problem would be keeping it from the government, who not only would disapprove and try to shut it down but also try and capture Izuku, not only for having access to all devil fruits but also have knowledge they do everything they can to keep quiet. It was when someone cleared their throats did Izuku realize he had been spacing out, and with a turn of his head he saw it was Nami, who he hadn't seen since the party started. Hey, can I talk to you about something? She requested, getting a nod from the teen as she began to lead him out of the village. So are the fishmen giving your clones any trouble? She asked. No, whenever they wake up and try and break out, my clones just knock them out again. He explained, getting a nod from the navigator before another hit her, causing her to look back at him as they walked. What about Hat-chan, I mean the octopus fishman? She clarified when she thought he would be confused. Izuku sighed sadly with a shake of his head. He's woken up, and just keeps crying. Constantly muttering things like, I'm sorry, and why did I let this happen, under his breath, the green-haired teen explained, causing Nami to stop and look down as she gripped her arm where her new tattoo had replaced her Arlong tattoo. Listen, can you just let him go? Now this surprised Izuku, and it must have shown on his face. Hat-chan wasn't like the others. He might have acted like he hated humans, but it became clear after a while that wasn't the case at all. She explained before looking at him. There were even times he helped people pay their survival tax. He couldn't do it often, of course, but he did when he could. Another change. Izuku noted while creating a clone and telling it to go release Hat-chan and kick him off the island before they continued on their way, before finally arriving at Nami's and her sister Nojiko's house, and was surprised not only to see the blue-haired woman but also Genzo and Neko, who grinned upon seeing him. Hey, sorry to call you up here, but there are some things we want to talk about. Nojiko greeted while the two men nodded before the group headed into the house before they sat around the table. First of, I know you've probably heard hundreds of times by now, but I gotta say it again. Thank you for setting us free. We've been living in nothing short of hell for the last decade, and the thought of actually being free now is still settling in. Genzo revealed, getting nods from the others. Though we do have a few questions if you don't mind answering. Nojiko requested, getting a silent nod from Izuku, knowing this was coming and hoping they didn't ask too many tough questions. Seeing this, the group started. Okay, first off, what are you doing here? It's obvious from your strength you can prosper in the Grand Line, so why waste your time in the East Blue? Nojiko asked, shattering Izuku's hope of no hard questions. It didn't get any easier with Neko's questions. And what about your multiple powers? Up until now we thought devil fruits were just a myth, but now they're clearly not. And if they're real, then how do you have more than one? Neko questioned, and Izuku was seriously struggling with what to say. However, it was Genzo's question that broke the camel's back. What are you going to do now? Izuku was silent as he clutched his hands tightly, wondering what exactly how to answer that question before taking a deep breath. Nothing ventured, nothing gained. He thought before looking at them all in the eyes. Alright, but it's a long story. With that, Izuku told them everything, from the world he was born in, his quirk, the memories, growing up fighting in the battle tower, and the events that led him to this point, having de-iced to lay everything on the table. Naturally, this was met with shock and skepticism, but thanks to items from his castle and memories thanks to his memo fruit, leaving the group stunned. That's a lot to take in, Genzo said, breaking the silence, with Neko nodding in agreement while making a mental note to give the boy a medical exam later. Nojiko and Nami meanwhile were silent. Nojiko, while feeling bad for Izuku, couldn't help but be grateful for the situation he found himself in. She knew that there was chance Izuku might be stuck here for the rest of his life, but after years of fearing for the lives of the people living on the Konomi Islands and her sister living as a SLV, she was ready for any help regardless of what it meant for others. Nami was having similar thoughts but held much more guilt as she recalled all the innocent people she threw to the wolves when she was escaping from pirates. How many times, and she set some random civilian up as her boss and left them to deal with enraged pirates. How many people, cities, families were ruined because of her. She kept saying it was for the good of her people, but it was just an excuse. She constantly told herself she was better than pirates because she only stole from pirates, but with everything she did she was no better than they were. As for what I'm going to do now, Izuku said, addressing the one question he never answered. I guess I'll travel the world looking for a way home. He answered. By yourself? Genzo asked with a raised eyebrow, getting a shrug from Izuku. Maybe, I could form a crew. I have to will be picky for who I chose, considering the government might give me a bounty if and when they learn about me. Izuku explained, getting nods from Nojiko, Neko and Genzo. None of them noticed Nami tense. Suddenly Izuku's eyes went wide as he shot out of his seat, starting the others. What is it, Izuku? Genzo asked, getting a scowl from Izuku, who had gotten the memories from his clones and said a simple word. Marines. Line break. Che, this place has sure seen some better days. A rather unremarkable man with a rat-like face laughed as he looked around the remains of Arlong Park. Captain Nezumi, what should we do now, sir? One Marine grunted, questioned, which caused Nezumi's smirk to widen. Search for anything valuable and claim it. After that we'll go see that Nami girl Arlong told us about. Apparently she has 95 million berries that she stole from others saved up, and it's our duties as Marines to confiscate it. Mizu said with a slimy smirk, and would have continued if not for a bow staff smashing into his face courtesy of an enraged Nami. Don't you dare touch that money. It's to help Kokoyashi village. The tangerine-loving girl yelled at him as Nezumi's men aimed their guns at her, only for an OFA-powered Izuku to smash into them, breaking guns and bones alike, while Nojiko, Genzo and Neko watched in the background, ready to get involved if needed. Nezumi meanwhile was clutching his face in pain. His nose was clearly broken and several of his teeth had been knocked. Who the hell do you think you are, you little beach? Do you have any idea who I am? Well, do you? Only for Nami to slam her foot down on his stomach, causing him to yell in pain as the girl glared at him. Yeah, I know you. You're the corrupt Marine that was in league with Arlong and let the people of the Konomi Islands suffer. Nami revealed, screaming by the end, to which the rat Marine just scoffed. And who the hell cares about a few backwater islands? Huh, it's not like you have anything to truly live for. So what if a few of the locals died? It's no real loss. Mizu shouted, and that seemed to be the final straw for the navigator, who slammed her bow staff down on his head, knocking him out. Izuku watched Nami take a few deep breaths before calming down and turning to Izuku. Hey, you were planning on leaving soon, right? She questioned, getting a nod from Izuku, to which Nami grinned. Then take me with you. She requested, getting wide-eyed from the three men while Nojiko just smiled like she was expecting this. Nami, what are you saying? You're finally free, you can do whatever you want now. Why do you want to leave so suddenly? Genzo said with Nami's grin widening. Exactly. Now I can finally chase my dream. To travel the world and draw a map of it. She revealed as she walked over to Izuku and hooked his arm between hers. And who better to travel with than the guy who saved us? She asked. At this Nojiko couldn't help a sly grin appear on her face. Oh Nami, how bold. Traveling with a guy 5 years younger than you. Why, what would Belmere think? She asked in a mock surprised tone. Hearing this, a huge blush appeared on Nami's face. Shut up. She shouted at her sister, who laughed along with Neko, while Genzo just gasped, not believing what he just heard. Izuku for his part just coughed and turned his head away. He wasn't against what the idea of dating Nami, and he did like older woman. Him dating Amanda was proof of that, and he knew she was planning on getting him a HRM. Holy SHT, Izuku suddenly thought, his eyes going wide. Amanda, there is an Amanda in this world too. The thought hadn't occurred to him but until then. Deciding he could deal with that train of thought later, Izuku turned his attention back to Nami, who looked ready to spit fire at her sister and the doctor before noticing he was looking at her. Are you sure? There's a good chance we will become enemies of the world government, and I'm not even sure there's a way to get home. We could be doing this for nothing. Nami just smiled confidently. Yeah, I'm sure, like I said, I'm doing this for my dream too. She said before pointing at the marine cruiser that the Marines brought. Besides, we even have our ship anyway. She said cheerfully, getting a smirk from Izuku, who looked it over. It was a standard Nami transport ship, but it should get the job done. It's a good ship though, let's change things up a bit. Izuku said, placing his hands on it, and activated the art fruit covering the ship in a thought cloud. When the cloud disappeared, they could see there were some changes to the ship. The most noticeable was the colors, which had once been the standard marine colors, had been replaced by dark browns, reds and yellows. The figurehead, which had once been a single pole, had become spear-like, and the marine emblems on the sails and flag had been wiped clean. I'll have some clones look over the ship and see what we need. He explained before looking at the Marines. As for them, I'll put them with the fishmen until tomorrow. He explained, with the 4 Kokoyashi natives growing tomorrow. Why tomorrow? Nojiko asked, getting a smirk formed the fighting champion. Because tomorrow Nami and I will be paying the Rats Marine base a visit. I mean, it's going to be a long journey, and I'm sure the Marines wouldn't mind if we liberated some of their supplies. Izuku finished. Normally Izuku wouldn't even think about anything like this, but if he's going to survive in this world, he would have to set certain morals aside. Nami soon had a smirk matching Izuku. Oh, I like the way you think, Captain. She said. The group soon left, leaving behind the clones to do their jobs. However, during this they missed a radio broadcast over on of the Den Mushies. Attention all ships. The Pirate Empress is no longer a warlord. Repeat, Boa Hancock has been STRPPD of her warlord statues. Line break. Well, this is it, you ready? Nami asked Izuku as the two were just outside the 16th Navy branch of the East Blue. The two had left early in the morning, not wanting to make a big fuss of it, but it didn't go so well as everyone in Kokoyashi had come to see Nami off. Izuku meanwhile had nodded with a smirk as he took in her appearance. She had on a pink short-sleeved shirt, yellow skirt and brown boots, while Izuku himself wore a dark blue shirt, green cargo pants and black combat boots. Seeing her younger captain nod, she smirked. And our guest, are they comfortable? She asked, getting a smirk, Izuku opening a hatch on his stomach, revealing the fishmen and corrupt Marines beaten, perfect. The navigator said as the hatch closed, as 2 clones appeared next to Nami to help her for her part of the plan. Nami would be responsible for stealing everything not nailed down, from food, weapons, medical supplies and most importantly money, with the clones responsible for dealing with any Marines who got in their way and carrying whatever they stole. After that, one of the clones would split from the group and head to the communication and surveillance room to delete any evidence they were ever there. Izuku's part was much more simple. When Nami and the clones were causing chaos, he would be heading straight towards Nozumi's office and strp it of anything valuable. However, the most important thing he had to do was contact Marine headquarters and inform them of everything that happened. Well then, Izuku said, cracking his neck before pulling his fist back and coating it in flames. Showtime, he said before launching a massive fire fist at the building. Immediately screams and alarms filled the air as Izuku and Nami glanced at each other before nodding and rushing into the building and taking down any Marines that got in their way. Neither of them noticed a figure watching them as they silently shuffled a deck of cards. Line break. It took little time for Izuku to find the rat's office. The fact that the Marines were screaming about guarding it from the invaders helped too. They didn't last long either, as Izuku used a Machi Gatling to knock them all out before busting down the door. The inside of the room was pretty standard, though Izuku knew there had to be more, which is why he quickly started tearing the room apart. What he found was invaluable. There was money alright, but there were also charts, maps, and most importantly evidence that would prove Nozumi's guilt, such as documents detailing his deals with Arlong, how many people have been killed by Arlong and how much Arlong pays him every month. Now for the fun part, Izuku said with a smirk before walking over to the Den Mushi and after finding the number for Marine Ford and called them. The snail instantly changed as someone picked up looking for mature and actually grew a handlebar mustache. This is Vice Admiral Stainless. Who am I speaking to and what is the reason for your call, soldier? The now named Stainless asked. Vice Admiral Stainless, I have some important matters to discuss with you. As for who I am, well, I'm the guy currently invading this base, Izuku finished with a smirk as the snail showed clear signs of anger and confusion. And just who the hell are you to invade a Marine base? The Vice Admiral demanded as Izuku had put the incriminating evidence into a fax to send to the Vice Admiral. That's not important, what is important is what I'm sending you now. Izuku responded as the info was sent, getting him from the Navy man before he read it over. It was silent for a few minutes as the Vice Admiral read the documents over, and it sure seemed to be having an effect as the snail kept looking more sick as the minutes went by until finally he spoke. The criminals, are they all still alive? He asked, and Izuku had to stop himself from asking, which ones? Yes, all of them are still alive, including the ones in this base. I don't kill, that's not I do things. He revealed while the mustached Vice Admiral sighed in relief. Thank God. Listen, I know I shouldn't be saying this, but I'm glad you took down these Marines. They were a stain on the world government. Stainless said, to which Izuku just shrugged. It's no problem after all. Here Izuku took a deep breath as he prepared for what he was about to say, something both he and Nami agreed to call themselves, so which a determination in his eyes Izuku finished. Pirates and Marines should be chasing each other, Izuku said, commenting to his new role. Stainless didn't seem that surprised, but if the twitching eye and the ugly look on the snail's face, Izuku would bet Stainless didn't like what he heard. You're a pirate? He asked after a moment, sounding like he was hoping Izuku would say no. Izuku was only too happy to end this hope. Yup, that was it, no turning back. Stainless sighed as before speaking again. Very well then, except no mercy for Marines, we will catch you just like any other pirate. Here Izuku smirked, best of luck. He said simply, and would have hung up had Stainless not asked one thing. Just who are you? Just tell me your name. Izuku was silent. There was something he wanted to say, but it would be so cliché. Ah, screw it. The setup's too perfect. Who I am, well, that's pretty simple. He said with a grin. I'm the man who's going to be king of the pirates. Line break. Well, someone was successful. Izuku muttered dryly as he saw Nami cradling one of the sacks of money while he and his clones watched with a sweat drop. You better believe I was, she said before going back to snuggling the money. 40 million berries, 40 million. That's 20 million each. She cheered while the clone just picked up the bundle, Nami and all. leaving the base with ease as the Marines had either been knocked out or had fled. It was when they had just left the building when a new steady, calm and deep voice spoke up. An impressive display. Fate truly blessed you today. It said as a man appeared out of the shadows. Basil Hawkins. What the hell is he doing in the East Blue? Wondering what the North Blue pirate doing here, mentally ordering his clones to guard Nami, who seemed a little freaked out by the soon-to-be supernova. Glad you enjoyed the show, but I've got a couple of questions. Who are you, why are you here and why were you watching us? Izuku asked, putting on the air that he didn't know the magician. Hawkins bowed his head slightly. Apologies, I am Basil Hawkins, a native from the North Blue. Hawkins introduced himself, getting a nod from Izuku Midoriya. Izuku Midoriya, he introduced himself before gesturing to Nami. That's Nami. He introduced with Nami raising her hand slightly hesitantly. Izuku, seeing this, decided to get to the matter at hand. So what exactly do you want, Hawkins? We kinda need to get out of here before more Marines start showing up. Izuku said, not wasting any more time. Basil nodded, accepting this. Very well, to put it bluntly, I believe fate has led me here for a reason. So please allow me to join your crew. The magician requested. What? T0 be continued. Well, there it is, the first chapter of the crossover, more than a little rough, but hey, what first chapter isn't? Now there's something you need to know about me. I love the supernova in One Piece, and I absolutely love fan fictions where they're all in the same crew. So for this story, with the exception of Luffy and Zoro, all supernova will be one of the crew. With Basil being first, since he is the easiest to come up with a reason for. Surprisingly, the next easiest is Kid, and you'll see why when we get to him, though I don't count Killer because he's kinda like a package deal with Kid. The 2-year time difference may seem like a weird and buzzer thing, but I do have a good reason for it. That being, we know basically nothing about how the supernova and pretty much anyone we see in the manga now fought 2 years ago. And this is just easier. I'm also taking requests for crew members. It can basically be anyone you want, and if I can think of a way to add them, I will. One last thing, I'll be trying to do as many of the specials and movies as I can. I think that's everything till next time, bye. The devil fruit hero Izuku stood dumbfounded as he stared at Hawkins, wondering how he should respond to the man's request. Normally one wouldn't think twice about accepting the request of someone so powerful, but if there's one thing Izuku learned from all the memories of previous devil fruit users and growing in the battle tower, he's learned to trust people so blindly. Izuku turned his head to Nami, who was frantically shaking her head no before turning back to the man who was waiting patiently for an answer. Why? Izuku finally said, choosing to use the blonde man's reason to decide. In response, the man took out a deck of cards. Fate instructed me. I want to find my destiny. Basil explained, getting a confused look from Nami. And you think you'll find it traveling with us? She questioned, getting a nod to the lanky man. Indeed, though there is another reason why I want to travel with you. Basil revealed. Believe it or not, I am a fortune teller and I use these cards to help with my predictions. Hawkins explained, placing the cards in the air only for them to be held in the air by strands appearing out of them, air creeping Nami out a bit. What are those? She questioned while pointing at the strands, causing Basil to look up at them before turning to her. They are straw. I ate the straw fruit and became a straw man. Hawkins explained briefly before turning back to his cards. Like I said, I use these cards to see what fate has in store so I can prepare accordingly. Which leads us to me coming here. A few months ago I was planning on heading out as the captain of my own crew. Fate had given me a high percentage of success, so it seemed logical to what I should do. He explained before looking up at Izuku. That is until something strange happened. He said, getting confused looks from the pair and the clones. What happened? Nami couldn't help but ask. I couldn't get a proper reading. He revealed. Ever since I started this path, I have always been able to get readings to determine chance of success or failure. Except for this one time. I couldn't understand what happened the day I was supposed to set out to sea. I did one last reading to make sure everything was as it should be. He said before shaking his head. Nothing, no matter what I did I could get any consistent reading. I always jumping back and forth. I cancelled my plans to look into this only for this to continue for several months. It was absolutely maddening. Hawkins said though the way he kept his voice monotone you'd have a hard time believing it. And then one day a few weeks ago I got my first proper reading since this began. It said if I truly wanted to find my destiny I would need to head east and find those who would help me find it. Basil finished his tale as Nami looked at Hawkins a little skeptical. And you think Izuku is the one to do that? She asked, her tone filled with more than a little suspicion. Hawkins nodded as he looked at the navigator. I do. He said simply before turning back to Izuku. I ask again, may I please join your crew? He requested to Izuku, who after a few moments nodded, causing the magician to bow his head. Thank you. No problem, now we need to get moving, the Marines will be here in a minute. Izuku instructed, taking all the stolen goods inside his body using the castle fruit as he and his now two crewmates left the area, and before long the island. Line break. It had been a few days since the assault on the 16th branch and Hawkins joined the crew. Hawkins himself had fit in rather well to the crew, having made himself at home in the men's cabin, which Nami was thankful for was on the opposite side of the women's cabin. Izuku offered her the captain's room, but she turned it down, stating that since Izuku was captain he should get it. Besides, she just knew that when, not if but when they gained another female on the crew, they would just be constantly fighting over it. Right now Hawkins and Nami were playing cards on the deck of the ship while Izuku was in the kitchen preparing lunch, having taken up the job of cook until they could find a proper chief. Back with Nami and Hawkins, Nami was getting frustrated. Out of the 10 hands they've played she's only won 2 out of 10 of them. She hadn't had a losing streak this bad in years, the only silver lining being they weren't betting anything. Luckily that's about to change, she thought while mentally smirking. Pair of kings, Nami said, laying down her cards before crossing her arms triumphantly. Aces, Hawkins says, simply laying down his cards on the table only for them to scatter as the navigator slammed her hand down on the table in frustration. Son of a dash. Boom boom boom, explosions from the water instantly rocked the boat, causing Nami and Hawkins to hold on to avoid falling. What the hell is going on out here? Izuku demanded as he ran from the kitchen. No idea. We were just setting her and suddenly the explosion started. Nami screamed over the explosions. I believe I have found the source, Hawkins said, as calm as ever, something Nami noticed. How the hell can you be so calm about all this? She demanded, looking ready to deck the fortune teller who didn't even blink. Because I do not see the shadow of death over any one of us today, he answered calmly, and Nami surprisingly calmed down, having learned to trust the blonde-haired man when it came to this time of thing. Still though, we need to be cautious, this could get tricky, Izuku said as he and his crew looked at the source. The first noticeable thing was the fact there was an actual plesiosaur. It was actually quite similar to its counterpart from Izuku's world, with a humped body, for flippers, and a long flexible neck. Its jaw alone looked large enough to swallow a human being whole. The most eye-catching thing about the beast, however, was the fact that it wore a plated kabuto helmet embezzled with a Jolly Roger that resembled a crew. However, the thing that truly caught the group's attention was what the beast was pulling. The thing was a massive, complex warship, with the most eye-catching thing was the giant cannon with what looked like 3 golden dragons wrapped around the top of it. The sails were adorned with the same Jolly Roger that was the plesiosaur's helmet. Izuku stared at the Jolly Roger in confusion. He knew he had seen it before from a memories, he just couldn't place it. Well, what do we have here? It would seem some has gotten itself in our way, a voice called from the ship as a figure came into view. It was a normal-sized man who was wearing what looked like crab-like armor on his back. The armor was attached with shoulder gauntlets with large crab claws. He was also wearing a red shirt, blue pants, and a blue cape. He had purple hair tied into a ponytail and a purple beard. He had a red ring around each of his eyes and an X-shaped scar on his left temple. He also wears a black pirate hat with the same Jolly Roger on it. DMN it, I still can't place him. Izuku thought with narrowed eyes, sure he had seen the man in someone's memories before. Nami and Hawkins both shared confused looks, well confused for Hawkins anyway. Ah, who are you? Nami asked, confused, her fear complete gone at seeing the generic pirate captain in front of her. The pirate captain's face meanwhile reddened in both anger and embarrassment. Are you telling me you lowlifes have never heard of the pirate shogun Gaznack? The now named Gaznack roared at them as Izuku snapped his fingers. Oh yeah, he was the crab guy Luffy beat up when he was just starting out. Izuku remembered before narrowing his eyes in confusion. But wait, does that mean he already destroyed the island where it was made? Izuku questioned before speaking up. Hey Gaznack, where did you get that ship? Izuku shouted, causing the purple-haired pirate to scowl at the lack of respect before grinning smugly. Jealous. Of course you are, who wouldn't be of a MSTR piece like this? Well, when you have as deep connections in the black market as I do, things like this are easy to get. He boasted while Izuku noted the new change. Gaznack then stopped laughing before grinning murderously down at the trio. Now then, on to business. He announced, his crew appearing behind him as Hawkins drew his sword and Nami her bow staff. Now then men, kill the two men down there and bring me the woman. I'm sure we can get a good price for her. Gaznack ordered as his men shouted and were ready to charge with the plesiosaur barreling down at them. Shink, only for it to soon be without its head, which fell into the depths of the ocean with the neck failing down into the water pouring out of the wound and coloring the ocean red. Gaznack and his crew stared shock, their eyes bugging out of their heads at what they just saw as Hawkins calmly flung his sword while Izuku grinned. Good work Hawkins, now you and Nami stay back, defend the ship. I'll be back soon. He told them, getting nods from the pair before he jumped high into the air and slamming down onto the deck of the ship before being surrounded by Gaznack and his men who were shaking with rage. You BSTRD, who do you think you are? One of the goons shouted as he rushed forward trying to cut him down, only for Izuku to slam his fist into the pirate's cheek, sending him flying off the into ocean. The rest of the Gaznack's crew looked scared now seeing the strength Izuku had, and even Gaznack looked somewhat nervous before steeling himself. What are you fools waiting for? They are only 3 people, forget about leaving the woman, just kill them all already. They can't beat all of us. A couple minutes later, however, Gaznack wasn't so sure. Most of his crew were either knocked out or had tried to swim away as he stared at the uncurious or groaning remains of his crew, while the trio had all boarded his ship with Izuku regrouping with his crew. You guys okay? He asked, getting nods from Nami and Hawkins. Yeah, after Hawkins took care of the plesiosaur the rest were nothing but common thugs. She revealed with Hawkins nodding in agreement. The men that had boarded their ship were down within seconds. He didn't even have time to make any of his dolls. By the point Gaznack was complete red, while shaking with rage. You worthless maggots. The purple-haired man roared, activating his crab armor, revealing blades and guns pointed at the group. All my hard work and you think you can just come and ruin it all? Not on your life. Now prepare your RCK. He was cut off by Izuku, who fired off a storm leg and hit him dead center in the chest, causing him to fall to the ground unconscious. Seeing him down and not getting up anytime, so Izuku turned to his crew. So who wants to raid the place? Instantly Nami's eyes turned to belly size. Now you're taking. She ran off with Izuku and Hawkins behind her, confident she would be getting her hands on a tons of treasure by the end of the day. Line break. How long do you think she will be like this? Izuku said as he and Hawkins watched Nami sulk in the corner of the ship, depressed. Turns out the ship was completely devoid of any kind of treasure and she was now in a bit of a funk. There is a 90% change our navigator will stop her sulking within 2 minutes. Hawkins read, confused on how such a thing was possible. Hearing this, Izuku raised an eyebrow, but before he could question it, something in the corner of his eyes caught his attention. Something was rapidly approaching their ship. As it neared the ship, Izuku was able to make out that it was a small row boat with what looked like 3 men rowing as fast as they can. However, the 2 men had no times to question what they were running away from as they passed Izuku's ship in an instant, leaving the pair confused. "Hey!" Nami said, suddenly getting up with a confused expression. "Does anyone else smell smoke?" She asked, getting Izuku and Hawkins to sniff the air, and sure enough the smell of sulfur was there. "I'm going to take a look from above," he told them, raising up in the air, getting a raised eyebrow from Hawkins. He knew his captain could use multiple devil fruits, even his own, but he wasn't told how yet. He wasn't angry though, since the cards told him there was a 100% chance that he would find out eventually. The question is when? He asked himself before going back to his cards and raising his eyebrow at what he saw. Nami meanwhile looked on concerned, and it only got worse when she saw Izuku come back down with a troubled expression. "Well, Izuku?" she asked hesitantly as Izuku sighed and pointed towards the direction the other boat was coming from. "There's an entire island on fire about 10 miles that way," he told her, causing her to eke in fear. "Then I say we steer well clear of it. It's too much for us at the moment," Nami said, though a part of her knew it was mostly her that wasn't ready. "Actually, I think it would us well to go towards that island," Hawkins advised, standing up and walking towards the pair, with Nami quick to question this. "And why would we do that?" she partially screamed at the blonde man. "Because there is a 77% chance that we will recruit new crew members if we do," Hawkins said calmly. This surprised both Izuku and Nami. "Well, that's good enough for me," Izuku said, wondering just who it could be, while Nami slumped in defeat. "Fine," she whined as Izuku headed for the wheel. "But if it's too dangerous, we leave immediately, got it?" she questioned, though she doubted Izuku heard her. She was about to leave when she felt Hawkins' hand on her shoulder, and she was surprised to see understanding in his eyes when she turned. "Despite what you may believe, both me and Izuku know what you're feeling. That you can't keep up with us, that you're slowing us down in battle, and that you can't fight on your own when it comes to stronger opponents," Hawkins revealed as Nami looked down depressed. Truth be told, she had felt like that. Years of stealing and running has not helped her fighting ablates that much. True, she could easily hold her own against the common East Blue thug, but she knew that wasn't going to cut it. Izuku intended to head for the Grand Line, a place where a single person could wipe out an entire crew from any of the 4 blues was common. She knew right now she didn't have a place among those monsters, and she desperately wanted to change that. As if reading her mind, Hawkins spoke up again. "Fear not, fate has declared you will get stronger, though I do not know how. So hold your head high, you already stand shoulder to shoulder with the captain and myself, and soon you'll be fighting shoulder to shoulder with us too." With that he walked away, and Nami stared at him stunned for a moment before wiping her eyes with a small smile before running to join her crew. Line break. At last they had arrived, and as they looked around they were surprised by the damage and wreckage, or rather the lack thereof. True, the forest was on fire, but that's there was no screaming, nothing. In fact, the only other noticeable thing was a small traveling ship docked there. "Well, Izuku, how's it looking?" she asked, having been told the basics of hockey along with Hawkins. "There are 2 people a little ways up the beach," Izuku said, getting nods from both Hawkins and Nami, with the navigator happy they won't have to fight an entire pirate crew again. That is, until she heard what Izuku said next. "Though they are much stronger than the Marines, Gaznack, and even Arlong. Honestly, I'd say they were on Hawkins' level," Izuku told them, causing Nami to let out a tiny squeak of fear, while Hawkins gained an interested look on his face. Suddenly Nami put on the best winning smile she could, though it was clearly forced, and she had beads of sweat on her face. "Hey guys, you know what, why don't we just leave? I mean, if they're as strong as Hawkins, then it'll be hard to believe they would want to join someone else. In fact, they probably already killed the guys could have possibly recruited. Right, Hawkins?" she asked, hoping she was right as Hawkins looked at his cards again. "The chance that we will recruit these 2 is 80%. IT went up. Nami screamed in her mind, wondering how that was possible, not noticing Izuku's smirk before picking her up bridal style, and told Hawkins to grab his shoulder, which the man did, and soon lifted the three of them up in the air and onto the island with the float fruit. When they landed, Nami seemed to snap out of her funk, and with a huge blush on her face scrambled out of his arms and onto the beach, squeaking out a "thank you," before quickly to stand behind Hawkins. Seeing how his crew seemed to be ready, Izuku started walking towards the two energies he felt, his haki on full alert to make sure they didn't go anywhere. They were just about to turn the corner where the two were when Nami suddenly tripped on something and started to fall, though Hawkins caught her before she could truly fall. "Are you alright?" he asked, getting a nod and thank you from the navigator before curiosity got the better and wondered what she had tripped on. Though once she cleared away the sand she couldn't hold in a scream of surprise. It was a man, or at least the remains of one. He was a dark-skinned, red-haired man that resembled a lion. He had broken shoulder pads made of gold, a torn white shirt and broken golden claws that had covered his normal ones. His injuries were incredibly severe. Giant holes like he had been impaled multiple times covered his body. His limbs twisted in several ways. Nami sat there frozen, not even trying to take the gold off, afraid. Basil and Izuku just stared at the body. Izuku knew who this was. This was El Drago, a man who had eaten the scream fruit. He was a rather unremarkable pirate who was obsessed with gold, who had fought and beaten by Luffy. So the question is, who killed him? Izuku asked himself. The answer presented itself as the two who he had been sensing made themselves known. "Well, looks like someone's found our handiwork," looked the woman, so impressed she's speechless. A voice Izuku knew all too well laughed, while a sigh came from his companion. "Honestly, it's one thing to kill someone, it's another to make jokes like that." A calm voice spoke, though it sounded muffled, and that's when the crew saw the two murderers. Eustace, Captain Kidd, and Massacre Solider, Killer. "What the hell are they doing in the East Blue?" he questioned before narrowing his eyes at them. "And why the hell is there a possibility I can recruit them?" Don't get him wrong, Izuku would definitely take the two into his crew, both for their abilities and to keep them from causing trouble. The problem was that he knew how independent Kidd was and knew he would never bend the knee to anyone, evident by with what happened with Kaido. Izuku's eyes widened as he remembered how a certain other crew of powerful and independent pirates was formed. That could definitely work, all he needed to was get him to agree. Izuku really didn't need to come up with a plan for Killer. If he got Kidd, Killer would naturally follow. Nami meanwhile had snapped out of her state of shock and glared at the red-haired man. "How could you do this to someone, and then laugh about it?" she demanded of him, not able to understand how he could laugh about this. It also didn't help the fact that she saw an overlap of Arlong laughing about her mother's death over him. What she didn't expect was for Kidd to suddenly scowl. "Of course I'm laughing, you beach. Why wouldn't I? After this bstrd killed my crew and severed my arm to steal a stupid treasure map, and I chased him from the South Blue, of course I would laugh after getting my revenge. Wouldn't you?" he snarled at her, with Nami going wide-eyed at hearing this. The want and need for revenge, that was something Nami could understand quite well. She knew what it felt like to want to absolutely kill someone. How many times did she try to kill Arlong only for it to end in miserable failure and for the fishmen to laugh as she got the CRP beaten out of her as a punishment? Nami also knew that she would probably do the same if she had managed to kill Arlong. Seeing this, Kidd managed to calm himself down. Normally he would have just killed the lot of them and be done with it, but he recognized the look on her face and knew she had experienced something similar. Kidd scowled as he looked down at the corpse of the gold-loving pirate with a growl. It wasn't just the fact that the bstrd had killed everyone bar him and Killer, it was also in the manner he did it. It was just after a hard-fought battle with another pirate crew. They were tired, wounded and in no shape to continue fighting. That's when El Drago appeared, launching one of those DMN voice blasts, destroying most of the ship and killing most of the crew instantly or quickly drowning as they fell into the ocean. The only reason Kidd was able to survive was because Killer had managed to pull him onto a piece of wreckage, but the explosion had blown his arm clear off. He watched with a burning hatred as the man sent in his 3 lackeys to retrieve whatever it was he was looking for. Turns out all they were after was one F map that was supposed to lead to a treasure in the East Blue. What it was doing in the South Blue Eustace didn't know, but at the moment he was too mad to care. The last thing he heard was the laughter from the BSTRD before passing out. When he came to, he was in an abounded sea cave with Killer treating his wounds the best he could with his entire left side bandaged up. He was momentarily confused before the memories started coming back, with them his rage. Telling Killer that as soon as he could walk they would be hunting the BSTRD down. Killer was in complete agreement. 4 days later, and with his new metal arm, Kid was ready, so they went into town, took down everyone who tried to stop them, and stole a ship the 2 of them were able to man on their own. When they had finally arrived, tracked the man down, they caught him firing blast at the island, lighting it ablaze and raging about how some pirate lied to him about gold. He never saw the giant golem fist heading towards him. Kid took another deep breath, trying to get his nerves under control. "DMN it, just thinking about it is pissing me off," he said, wishing there was something he could take this out on. Suddenly his eyes shoot towards Izuku, who was standing there with crossed arms, looking to be deep in thought. Or someone. Kid thought, a menacing grin etching its way onto his face. "Oi musclehead, you look like you enjoy a good fight," he said, his grin widening when Izuku nodded before he pointed towards himself. "Well then, why don't you try taking me on?" he challenged, getting a raised eyebrow from Izuku. "Well, that makes things simple," the teen thought before answering. "Sure, but let's make things interested." Getting an interested look from Kid. "How so?" he asked. "We put our lives on the line, with the life of the loser going to the winner to do with as they please," he suggested, getting shocked looks from Nami, Kid, and unknown to everyone, Killer. "Hey, wait a minute." Nami tired to step forward, but Hawkins put his hand in front of her, causing the girl to look at him and see him shake his head before she'd back to the 2 captains in time to see Kid snap out of his stupor and start to laugh. "Well, you've certainly got some ball on you, don't you, brat? Fine, but don't start crying and begging when I've got you dead to rights," he threatened before turning around and started walking down the beach. "Follow me," he instructed, not breaking his stride, with Izuku right behind him, and after a moment Nami, Killer, and Hawkins followed. "This is crazy. What's Izuku thinking?" Nami said furiously, not believing what was happening. It was one thing to agree to fight, but to propose a death match. "I can't believe Izuku is that kind of guy," Nami continued to rant. Besides, her Killer nodded, not seeing the point of this. They had already got revenge, there was no need for any further fighting. Both were brought out of their thoughts by Hawkins. "Who said anything about a death match?" he questioned, getting both to stop and look at him. "Weren't you listening, Scarecrow? Your captain proposed to pit their lives on the line," Killer argued, and to their surprise Hawkins nodded. "Yes, and the winner gets to do whatever he wishes with the loser. That doesn't mean one has to die," Hawkins said before walking ahead, leaving behind 2 confused pirates. "Doesn't have to die. Then what could Izuku?" Nami muttered before her eyes widened in realization as she recalled what Hawkins told them on the boat. "There is a 77% chance to find new cremates if we go to that island." "So that's your plan, Izuku?" Nami thought with a grin as she sped up to catch up with Hawkins, leaving Killer behind confused. Eustace and Izuku had meanwhile reached their destination, and Izuku wasn't surprised by what he saw. "It looks like a scrap yard," Izuku thought as looked around and saw all the swords, guns, cannons and other broken metal lying around. Kid in the meantime had his arms spread out wide. "Man, whenever I stand in the middle of scrap like this I can't help but think of home," he revealed before bringing his arms down. "Now then," he whispered menacingly as he held up his right hand, purple lighting jetting from it before turning around suddenly to face Izuku. "Let's get star." That was all he got out as Izuku's fist landed right in the side of his face, sending him flying several feet in the air and past the junk pile. Suddenly using shave Izuku appeared right in the air right beside Kid, who had no time to react as Izuku kicked in the stomach, causing the red-haired man to plummet straight back down to the planet, where he landed with a thud and a groan. Kid glared up at his opponent, who was staying in the air thanks to Skywalk. Alright, that enough. Kid thought with a scowl as he got to his feet. Time to get serious. Raising his hand, Kid's magnetic power activated, causing dozens of swords to rise off the ground before flying towards Izuku with the intent to impale the teen. Though this proved to be useless as the swords passed harmlessly through Izuku thanks to the through fruit. Devil fruit powers, huh? Yudis thought with an annoyed scowl before having to jump out of the way to avoid a series of storm legs. Hey! How about you come down here and fight me like a man instead of running like a coward? Kid taunted Izuku, who smirked in reply. Alright. He simply said before disappearing from view. Kid looked around frantically trying to figure out whether the slippery BSTRD was coming from when all of a sudden Izuku appeared right in front of him with a shave before unleashing a barrage of punches and kicks all over the magnetic manipulator before ending it with a hockey-powered punch, sending him flying into the ship he and Killer had arrived on. While this was going on, the others had arrived and were watching the fight proceed. That's the way, Izuku. Just a little more and he'll be finished. Nami cheered for her captain. As this was going on, Killer had to keep himself from shaking, wanting nothing more than to jump in and defend his captain and childhood friend. But he couldn't bring himself to do it. He respected Kid for too much to do get in the way during a fight. Besides, Kid would never accept his help, especially since the fight is his idea in the first place. You needn't worry, the shadow of death isn't upon either of them today. Hawkins spoke, suddenly startling Killer before looking at the magician questionably. As if feeling the masked pirate's eyes on him, Hawkins spoke again. Neither man will fall before sunset today, of that I am certain. With that the magician went silent again. Killer turned his attention back to the fight, hoping the straw man was right. Back with Izuku, he was trying to see any signs of Kid but just couldn't see him, and was about to head towards the ship himself when laughter emitted from it. I gotta say, you're better than I expected. He declared, raising his arm, purple lighting appearing on it as he did so. With that movement, everything metal on the beach and ship started raising into the air. The bladed weapons mixed the scraps, forming giant spears and borders, while all the guns and cannons were all posed to fire. Well boy, any final words? He asked, with Izuku remaining silent before nodding. Yeah, I do. One, in fact. He told the red-haired captain, who nodded. And that is? Izuku just raised his fingers and snapped. Raikiri. In an instant all of Kid's weapons were vaporized in a flash of lighting. How though? He questioned before looking up and gasping. Those are thunder clouds. Gasped Nami, staring up at the clouds as lighting dancing around them. When did he do this? She questioned, with Hawkins being the one to answer. Since we landed. He started off small so no one would notice, but once he saw everyone's attention was on the fight, he brought them in at a more rapid pace. Hawkins finished his explanation. Meanwhile, Kid and Killer were beyond shocked at seeing the storm, not because of the storm itself but at the implications. The BSTRD has 2 devil fruits. Kid cried, how thought? He demanded angrily, trying to wrap his mind around this new situation. Wouldn't you like to know? A voice said from behind him, causing him to freeze before slowly turning around to see Izuku, who appeared out of nowhere slam his fist into the redhead's face, causing him to fly back to island and fall just short of the burning trees, where he had time to react as Izuku slammed into him, his foot pinning the prospect arm while gripping Kid's neck with his right hand. Kid! Killer screamed, having seen enough and about to rush in. Kid's pride beat med when he found a blade at his neck. Just watch. Hawkins ordered in a tone that bore no argument. Kid meanwhile glared up at Izuku, who was watching with no emotions. What? Are you expecting me to cry or beg? Well, if so, go F yourselves. I'm no beggar, so go ahead and kill me already. Kid screamed, refusing to look weak in front of his soon-to-be killer. What he didn't expect was for Izuku to laugh. Now why would I kill my new crew member? He asked rhetorically, getting shocked looks from Eustace and Kid. What? Both stammered out, causing Izuku to laugh harder. Why are you surprised? It's what we agreed on. Now hold on. Yuta said, a confused glare on his face as his temper started to rise again. We agreed on a death match. Kid shouted, only causing Izuku to smirk. No, you said death match. I said the loser's life would belong to the winner. Now since you lost, your life belongs to me, and I say you join my crew. Izuku reveled before turning to Killer, you can come along too if you want. After Izuku was done with his explanation, Kid was silent before he started to shake rapidly and violently. Hey Kid, are you? Killer couldn't finish his question though, as Kid couldn't hold it in anymore and let out the loudest laugh he ever had. He was laughing so hard he had to grip his stomach, all the while ignoring the pain he was feeling from the fight. Finally, after several minutes, Kid managed to gain control of his laughter, and after a few deep breaths he spoke again. You're on crazy BSTRD, you know that. Putting your life at risk just for the chance to get new crewmates. Honestly. Kid finished with a smile and shake of his head. Fine, a deal's a deal. I'll join your crew. He promised before turning to Killer. What do you say, partner? He asked, with Killer simply nodding. Well, looks like our crew just grew, for better or worse. Nami muttered with an uneasy smile as Hawkins nodded, his predictions having once coming true. Izuku meanwhile was helping Kid to his feet. Sorry, but we don't have a doctor yet, so we can't exactly patch you up perfectly yet. Kid just waved off the apology. It's fine, I heal fast, and as long as we do our jobs right we won't need a doctor that much yet. Right? He questioned, getting a smirk in reply. Well. Kid sighed, dusting himself off. We might as well head towards your ship. I would say we should get some supplies from mine, but there's really nothing left. No problem, we've got plenty of everything. Including dangerous weapons. Izuku said with a grin that Kid matched. It was just when they started walking that Killer spoke up. So what are we calling ourselves? When Kid was captain we just called ourselves the Kid Pirates. Killer asked, causing Nami and Hawkins to look at each other, not having discussed that before. So it came as a little surprise when Izuku provided an answer. I've actually been given that some thought and have finally came to an answer. He informed them, causing his now 4 crew members to listen in interested. And that would be? Kid questioned, with Izuku smirking. The Devil King Pirates. The Cooking Festival Part 1. Before we begin, I'd just like to say something. When I started this story I wanted to keep things strictly to the One Piece world with the exception of the devil fruits. However, I have come up with a few things that could still fit in the story realistically. So with that in mind, there will be a few things from other series in the story, but nothing too major. Or at least try and keep it that way. It had been a couple of days since Kid and Killer joined the recently named Devil King Pirates, and things have been mixed. Killer melded into the crew while being respectful enough with Hawkins, accepting Izuku as his new captain and actually finding kind of kindred spirit with Nami in trying to be the voices of reason for their other crew members. Kid was where things got a little complicated. He had indeed accepted Izuku with Killer, though he was dying to challenge him again, but it would have to wait until they found a doctor to patch him up. Kid and Nami also respected each other, though that didn't stop them from bickering with each other. Their tempers and personalities often causing them to argue. The problem came with Hawkins. Kid was honestly just a little disturbed by the magician. Call it paranoia, but when someone shows as little emotion as Hawkins, it's bound to stir some unease in the red-haired man. It didn't help the magician always seemed to have a comeback ready whenever Kid taunted him. Still, the two managed to stand each other and have conversations, so there was hope. However, Killer did bring up a good question when he asked what the name of the ship was, something that Izuku completely forgot about, but before he could think of something Hawkins spoke up. Sharon. He said simply. Named after the ferryman of the dead. Appropriate, don't you think? Hawkins with asked, and with that the Sharon was named. It was a little after sunrise when Nami emerged from her room, stretching her arms as the sun hit her face. "What a great morning," she said with a grin as she looked the sky and saw the weather was perfect while absent-mindedly taking in the smells from the kitchen. "Well, I guess Izuku's up," she commented before spying a news coup and waving it down to get the paper. It was then the door to the men's quarters opened and Killer appeared without his helmet but his hair covering his eyes. "Morning," he greeted with a yawn as he walked over to the navigator. "Morning," she greeted back. "How'd you sleep?" "Fine," he answered before an uneasy smile came to his face. "Kid and Hawkins though?" He trailed off as the two mentioned emerged for the cabin with the two looking annoyed. Well, Kid looked annoyed. It was hard to tell with Hawkins. Seeing this, Nami couldn't help but sweat drop. "Okay, what happened there?" she questioned with Killer sighing. Kid's annoyed that Hawkins kept him up late, and Hawkins annoyed due to the fact that Kid snored. The blonde explained, causing Nami to understand. It was then the four made their way to the kitchen where Izuku had just finished with breakfast. "Honestly, Midoriya, we gotta find a full-time cook," Kid said, and while he found his captain's food delicious, he felt unless the entire crew was centered around cooking like the one led by Redleg Zeph, then the captain should be commanding, not cooking. Izuku nodded in understanding. "Yeah, but where would we find someone like that? It's not like there's a ton of chefs ready to drop everything and become a pirate," Izuku argued, and aside from the Baratai he couldn't think of anywhere where they could find a chef that would fit in well with the crew. "Actually, Izuku, I may have our answer," Nami said with a grin as she read the paper before revealing it to the crew. "For Blue's Cooking Festival coming to East Blue." "For Blue's Cooking Festival?" Izuku questioned, getting a raised eyebrow. "Kid, you've never heard of it? It's pretty famous." The magnetic manipulator questioned, causing Nami and Izuku to grow nervous, having decided for the time being to keep Izuku's past a secret. Luckily, Kid moved on. "Anyway, every year, an island is chosen to hold this big party that's all about food and cooking. It lasts a week and cooks from all over the world come and test their skills against each other. It goes in a big rational pattern of the four blues every year," Kid explained with Killer nodding. "Yeah, Kid and I were able to go to one a couple of years ago and it was fantastic. Plenty of talented cooks to choose from. In fact, that's the sole reason many pirates go, so they can recruit a chef." Killer continued, getting a surprised look from Nami. "Wait, pirates can go to this? What about the Marines?" Nami questioned, getting a shake from Killer. "They don't usually bother. Most of the cooks there can fight as well as they can cook, and since most of the visitors are from the four blues, there's not really any real threat," Kid explained before shrugging. "Besides, we don't even have a flag yet, and unless someone from that Navy base you and the captain attacked shows up, we shouldn't have anything to worry about," Kid explained, having been told how the two had met the weird magician. "It's also extremely cheap. There are amazing deals during the entire event," Nami said, excited that she could get some good food without losing much of her beloved money, getting chuckles from the rest of the crew. "Well, I have no problem with this, but can we get there in time?" Izuku asked, causing Nami to look at the paper and after a minute nod her head. "Yup, we should be able to get there right at the start of the second day," she confirmed, having done all the calculations in her head. "Well, then it's decided, we're heading to the cooking festival." Getting grins from the men and a cheer from Nami. Boom, boom, boom! The blast came so suddenly it knocked everyone off their feet and sent them scrambling to the floor. Izuku grunted as he got up, an annoyed scowl on his face. "As soon as we take care of this mess," he told his crew, who nodded in agreement as they rushed outside to see who was attacking, though there was no real need to worry. "Jaya, ha ha ha. Men, prepare yourselves to board this ship and take everything they've got. All in the name of Captain Buggy," the blue-haired pirate announced as the Devil Kings heard the order and saw who was attacking them, only to be somewhat disappointed when they saw the clown-themed pirate who looked exactly the same as when he first fought Luffy. Kid himself couldn't help the annoyed sigh that escaped him. "Really? We got all worked up over the C-lister. he asked, sharing the same annoyed look all the men had. Even Killer had rushed to the men's quarters to retrieve his mask, scythe armbands, and Hawkins' words seemed annoyed. Nami was just hoping that this would end soon so she could steal their treasure. Buggy didn't take too kindly to this however and grew enraged at Kid's words. "What the hell did you say, you flashy bastard?" The blue-haired pirate screamed at the group, who only looked annoyed at how loud he was being. "God, he's annoying too," Kid muttered, ready to beat the SHT out of Buggy. "Watch your mouth, rookie, and show Captain Buggy some respect." Kabeji, the Buggy pirate's chief of staff, shouted from atop his unicycle. "Yeah, do that and we'll make your deaths quick." Moji, the first mate, added his 2 cents, in his skinny form. Izuku, seeing they were done, just sighed, "Look, it's too early for this CRP, so how about you PSS off and we can do this later?" Izuku said, just wanting the clown to leave. Buggy just seemed to get angrier and angrier until he was shaking with rage. "Yuflashipstrits," he finished before looking at them with, "You'll pay for your insolence," he shouted before turning to his crew. "Men, load the buggy ball. Flashy, send these BSTRDS to hell," he ordered as his men scrambled to do as told before pointing a cannon at the smaller crew and loading it with a red cannonball with the Buggy Pirates logo on it. "So are we going to do anything to stop this?" Killer asked, looking at his crewmates, and aside from Nami, who was hiding behind the mast, the rest were just standing there waiting to see what would happen. "Kid, get ready." Izuku spoke up, causing the red-haired man to raise an eyebrow before smirking and nodding in understanding. "It's ready, Captain." One of Buggy's underling reported, getting a laugh from the clown. "Excellent, men, now fire." The crew did as they were told, and a second later the cannonball was flying towards the Devil Kings. Kid just lazily lifted his hand. "Repel." In an instant the buggy ball stoked before flying back towards the crew, who could do nothing to stop it. Boom! The force of the blast surprised the Devil Kings and forced them to grab onto something to stop themselves from being blown away while shielding their eyes from the resulting light. When the light died down and the crew could see again, they were surprised to see the bow of the ship along with most of the crew gone, leaving only Buggy, Kabeji, Moji, and the Tiger Richie, who stared there dumbfounded at what they just saw. Seeing this, Izuku turned to his crew. "Well, that's that. Now let's get going," he said, moving towards the helm, but stoked when he felt a hand on his shoulder and turned to see it was Hawkins. "A moment please, Captain, let the 3 of us fight them. Fate has declared it could be beneficial to us." Hawkins spoke up, causing Izuku to raise an eyebrow before shrugging. "Sure, why not, just don't drag it out," Izuku instructed, getting a mad grin from Kid and nods from Killer and Hawkins. "Right," they all said before heading off to face their opponents. As the 3 boarded Buggy's ship, Izuku noticed Nami was heading towards the woman's quarters. "Not going to watch?" he asked, getting a shake of the head from the orange-haired girl. "Nah, they got this, I'm going to go change and get ready for the day," she informed, getting a nod from Izuku, who turned back to watch his crew mates fight. Killer versus Moji, and Richie. Moji smirked as he looked down upon his masked opponent as he sat upon Richie's head, while the lion glared meaningly down at what he very much intended to make his next meal, while Killer stood there with arms crossed waiting for the duo to make their first move. Finally Moji spoke, breaking the silence. "Tell me something, do you really think you can beat me?" Moji, first mate of the Buggy Pirates and MSTR animal tamer, along with his partner Richie. Moji, his voice dripping with arrogance and amusement as his smirk seemed to get bigger by the second. Killer simply nodded. "I do, but I gotta say, if you fight as well as you dress yourself, I have nothing to worry about. Especially if that headdress is any indication." At that moment all amusement left his face as he glared down at his opponent. "This is my real hair, you bstrd," he shouted at Killer before looking at his pet. "Richie, attack," he ordered, causing the lion to roar before pouncing, ready to shred the masked man to pieces. Which is why it came as a shock when Killer ducked underneath the lion's front paws and wrapped his arms around the beast midsection. "Bad kitty," Killer said simply before lifting the beast into the and throwing the animal into the ocean. "Richie, no. Moji, who had jumped off the lion just in time, screamed to see his beloved pet hit the water before turning and glaring hatefully at Killer. "You heartless bastard, how could you do that? What if Richie couldn't swim?" Moji indicated as he gestured to the lion, who seemed to have lost all interest in fighting and now seemed to be trying to catch some fish to eat. Killer briefly looked over at the lion before looking back at the first mate. "That sounds more like a you problem," the blonde said, simply further enraging the first mate as he took out a WHP from seemingly nowhere. "That's it, you masked freak. You are dash." Killer didn't let him finish as with surprising speed appeared right in front of the animal tamer, shocking the man before slamming his fist into Moji's face. The force behind the blow so created forced Moji through the deck into the ship below, where Moji lay there motionless. "Sorry. I couldn't let you finish, Captain's orders," Killer said as he looked down at his fallen opponent before heading back to the ship. Killer vs. Moji, and Richie, winner, Killer. Hawkins vs. Kabeji. Kabeji was growing increasingly annoyed as his opponent calmly blocked each of his sword strikes. It only got worse when his arsonist technique and his dance of 100 kamikaze tops failed to even hit him. What was worse was, thanks to the already limited space of the ship plus all the damages to it, Kabeji was unable to unleash quite a lot of other tranche-based moves. Finally, after another exchange of blades, the chief of staff lost it. "Why won't you just stand still, DMN it?" he shouted at the stoic man. To his surprise, however, after a moment of silence, Hawkins nodded and sheathed his sword before spreading his arms wide. "Strike me down if you wish, but know that if you do, you will ensure my victory." Hawkins warned, only for Kabeji to scoff and race forward on his unicycle, sword raised high, and without hesitation slashed the man from the top of his left eyebrow he way down to the top of his right leg. "Ha! See that? Looks like this will result in victory," Kabeji shouted triumphantly as he looked back at his downed opponent, only to realize something is extremely wrong as Hawkins stood there completely fine. Before he could even react, a sharp pain tore through his body. How? That was the chief of staff's final thought before he collapsed onto the deck, bleeding out. As he slipped into unconsciousness, he missed the sight of Hawkins raising his arm, and a small straw doll falling from his sleeve pierced with the exact same injury Hawkins had taken. Hawkins vs. Kabeji, winner. Hawkins had just made it back to the ship where he had meet up with Killer. "So I see you are done as well." Hawkins greeted, getting a nod from Killer as the both jumped over to their ship where Izuku greeted them. "Well done, guys, but where's Kid?" he asked, however, before anyone could answer. Screams and maniacal laughter could be heard from the cabin of Buggy's ship. "Never mind. Kid vs. Buggy, SHT. Buggy thought, frantically running as fast as he could to his cabin as he dodged large scarps of metal that kept being hurled at him from the laughing maniac behind him. At first he thought it would be easy. Sure, the man had a devil fruit and blew away most of his crew, but those were his foot soldiers and nowhere near the strength of himself, Kabeji or Moji. Plus there was his own chop fruit, so it wasn't like he could be cut. Without fear, Buggy drew his knives and lunged towards Kid with the intent to kill. It was only when his knives got stuck in Kid's metal arm did he properly notice it, and by then it was too late, as Kid had attracted weapons scattered around the deck until he had a pair of golem arms attacked and started chasing after a now terrified Buggy. "DMN it. What's it going to take to bring this flashy bastard down?" Buggy screamed in his mind as he finally made it to his cabin. Quickly flinging open the door before shutting and locking it, he ran over to his desk and quickly began searching for the one thing that might save him. "Where is it? Where is it?" he shouted, knowing he had only seconds before the manic burst through the walls. "Yes," he shouted as he had finally got it, and not a moment too soon, as a second later the door burst down and Kid was standing there, his makeshift arms bigger now due to him adding weapons to them as he chased the clown. "Well, here we are, end of the line. You finally ready to fight like a man? Ha, you really think you can flashy take me, the great Captain Buddy, down?" the clown asked before extending his hand and holding what looks to be a tiny ball between his finger. "Behold the instrument of your destruction, the muggy dash." Crash. The clown was cut off as Kid shot one of his golem arms at the clown, slamming into him at point, breaking, smashing him into the wall and into unconsciousness. Kid vs. Buggy winner, Kid. Well, that was fun. Kid muttered Aro himself, seeing the destruction he caused, and was about to leave when something caught his eye on Buggy's desk. Curiosity getting the best of him as he went over and looked it over, and when he did his eyes widened in shock. No F way. Kid whispered as looked over what he was seeing, trying to find any indication that it was fake, only to find none. It's the real deal, he muttered in shock before a grin appeared on his face. Jackpot, he said as he started down at his discovery. A map of the Grand Line. A few minutes later he was back on the Sharon with his discovery that Nami was now giving a through look over to make absolutely sure it was real. I can't believe it, how did that idiot get his hands on this? She questioned as she held it gently in her hands. Doesn't matter, it's ours now, Kid commented, getting nods from the others. So I guess that settles it, Izuku told them, getting his crew's full attention. After we get a cook from the festival we head straight for the Grand Line, he told them, getting nods from the guys while Nami looked a little unsure. Are you sure that's a good idea, Izuku? I mean, shouldn't we try and get a doctor first at least? We still need to get Kid patched up, she questioned, wanting to be as prepared as possible before heading towards a place that has been dubbed the Pirate's Graveyard. Izuku just smiled. Relax, Nami will be fine. We can get Kid patched up when we get to the festival, there's bound to be doctors there. Who knows, maybe we can even recruit one. Izuku tried to reassure her before turning to Kid. That okay, will you, Kid? The young captain questioned, with the only injured man on the ship. Kid just nodded. Yeah, it's fine, all I really got were some scrapes and bruises, so a lot of it should heal on their own. Kid assured his crewmates, and true to his word, most of his wounds were already healed and the rest were getting better by the day. Nami, not having any other concerns she could voice, sighed tiredly but fondly. There's really no arguing with these guys, Nami thought before grinning. Well then, what are we eating for? Let's go to the cooking festival, she cheered, getting cheers from the others as they sailed on, leaving Buggy and his crew behind, already forgotten. Line break. It had 4 days for the Devil King pirates to reach the island where the cooking festival was being held, with Nami being right about them getting there on the second day. Man, look at this place, Nami said as she and the rest of the crew walked around the island, taking in the various people and makeshift shops serving food of all varieties. It's even more lively than I remember, Kid chuckled, with Killer nodding in agreement. Guess the only question is where to start. Killer asked the question that was on everyone's mind. However, before anyone could answer, an amused voice sounded from behind him. I would start with treating with your friend's injury. As one, the crew turned to face the man who intruded on their conversation, with Izuku letting out a sigh. Of course he would be here. Trafalgar D. Water Law, Izuku thought as he gazed upon the surgeon of death. What the hell is he even doing here? He should be in the North Blue or Grand Line right now, Izuku thought to himself. Meanwhile, the rest of their crew had started a conversation with Law, with Kid taking the lead. And just why the hell should we listen to a guy like you? The redhead asked, and although he couldn't place it, there was something about this man that set Eustace off. Law just gave his devil may care smile, further angering Kid, especially when Law gave a careless shrug. Well, I am a doctor, believe it or not, Law revealed, getting surprised looks from Nami, and although they couldn't see it, Killer, a raised eyebrow from Hawkins and a disbelieving scowl from Kid. Yeah right, and I'm Big Mom's long-lost son. Kid scoffed at the claim. However, before anything could be said, Izuku entered into the conversation. If you're a doctor, then why don't you join our crew? Izuku offered, getting incurious looks from Kid and Nami, and raised eyebrows from Hawkins, Killer, and Law himself. So you lot are a pirate crew, and a small one at that, Law observed, while scratching his chin in a thinking manner. Well, we're just starting out, we actually came here to see if we could recruit a chief before heading to Grand Line, the young captain explained, with Law nodding in understanding before asking his next question. So were you planning on heading to the Grand Line without a doctor? In that see a doctor is just as important as a cook. Law said, brining up a good point. True, it would be idly to have a doctor ready right from the beginning, but if we recruit one from while in the Grand Line, chances are there'll be more knowledge should a crew member come down with a disease. Izuku countered with Law nodding, admitting that was a fair point. SP, what do you say, want to join? Izuku asked, hoping Law would join. In truth, it wasn't entirely Law's medical skills that he wanted. After all, since he had all of Law's memories, he technically knew more about medicine than this current Law did. Still, there was a difference between knowledge and experience, and Law had more experience than Izuku ever entered to get. However, the other reasons were his knowledge of the word itself and the goings-on in it, as well as his ope fruit, a truly dangerous fruit, especially in the hands of a great doctor like Law. Law meanwhile was thinking over the offer presented to him. The reason he came here in the first place was to sign on as one of the doctors for the festival so he could earn some extra cash before he entered the Grand Line to start his plans. Now, had the people in front of him been just normal run-of-the-mill pirates, then he would have rejected the offer from the start, considering his plans would require him to gather powerful allies. True, he didn't technically have to be the captain, but if he was going to join a crew, he knew it had to be a powerful one. Let's see what you're about, Law thought to himself before talking again. Before I answer, tell me, what is your goal in all of this? Law questioned. To find the One Piece and conquer the New World. Izuku answered honestly, getting a raised eyebrow from Law and smiles from his crew. Conquer the New World, how do you plan on doing that? Here Law, the Devil King pirates themselves and everyone in the area actually had to back away as an intense filled the area as a mad grin appeared on Izuku's face. How will I do it? Simple, by taking down anyone who gets in my way. Doesn't matter if they are the warlords, world government, or even the Yonko themselves, if they get in my way they're going down. So what do you say, Law, you in? Izuku asked, sticking out his hand with a smirk for Law to shake. Law looked at the hand for a few seconds before smirking and shaking his head. Aye, Captain. He agreed, causing Izuku's smirk to widen. Great, good to have you. Izuku told him with Law's smirk matching his own. Great to be here, but you'll have to wait until the end of the week. I still am one of the doctors here after all. Law informed him with Izuku nodded. Not a problem, we'll meet up here later to show you our ship. Izuku offered with Law grinning. Perfect, now that that's settled I'll just take Red over there to patch him up at the hospital. He told the group while indicating to Eustace before turning around and headed in the direction he came from. However, he stopped a few seconds later. Come on, Red, I don't have all day. He said, annoyed without even looking, causing Eustace to glare and scowl before turning to Izuku. Are you really just letting him onto the crew just like that? Kid questioned. Izuku nodded. I am Kid, he'll make a good member, I know it. Kid continued to glare at his captain for a second before reluctantly running after Law. Once they were out of sight, Izuku turned to the rest of his crew. Well, with that out of the way, how about we look for Chief? Izuku asked as he began to walk forward with Hawkins a step behind him, not bothered by having a complete stranger suddenly join the crew. Nami and Killer were a little sure as they glanced at each other nervously. So you think this is going to be okay? Killer asked, hesitant with leaving his closet friend in the hands of a complete stranger. Well, Izuku usually knows what he's doing, so this should be fine, right? She said, sounding like she was trying to reassure herself then her friend. With little else they could do, the pair ran to catch up to the pair, and the four continued to look around to see everything they could and taste everything they could, which was dirt cheap, much to the happiness of Nami. The food itself was simply amazing, what one would expect for a top-scale restaurant, and there were many chefs that Nami, Killer, and even Hawkins thought would make a good addition to the crew. However, Izuku wasn't satisfied with any of them. He couldn't put his finger on it, but he just felt like they were missing something. Eventually the sun was beginning to set and the Devil Kings were just about to turn around when they saw a large crowd gathered around in the plaza of the city, along with the sounds of fighting. Curious about what the commotion was about, they decided to investigate, and upon getting closer a sign was planted off to the side. It read, "Kill and Grill." Oh, I remember this. Killer said, sounding excited as he got the attention of the group. This is like a fighting cooking game. Chiefs would enter the arena with some wild beast that they caught, and if they manage to kill the beast they'll get to have the beast with up to 100,000 berries worth of ingredients to go with it. Killer explained the rules, getting interested in the contest, so they quickly pushed their way to the front, and just in time for the next event. Alrighty folks, I hope you enjoyed that last fight. An announcer from somewhere said as they crowd cheered, while a man about 10 feet tall grinned before throwing what looked like a giant dead snake over his shoulders before walking off to grab his ingredients. Next up is our main event, people. The announcer informed, casing the crowd to go wild. While this was going on, a few of the festival workers wheeled in a giant cage that was thrashing violently with roars of anger and hunger came from it. One on side we have the beast caught all the way in the barren archipelago, in the north blue we have the gal alligator. The announcer said as the crew opening the gate quickly while the guards stood on standby ready to protect the crowd. When the monster finally did come out, the majority of the crowd gasped in fear and Izuku couldn't help the whistle that escaped him. The behemoth was a monster of a gator. While still in a typical gator shape, it was much bigger than an elephant, as well as having 8 legs and red skin. It had 2 rows of sharp yellow spikes that go down its scaly back much like its claws. Its eyes green and full of hunger, while its teeth were white and sharp, protruding out of its mouth. Now then, let's introduce his opponent. The announcer shouted, pumping up the crowd even more as what sounded like heels could be heard. She comes here from the South Blue and she's diffidently brought her appetite. Introducing the one, the only. The announcer screamed with the crowd going absolutely crazy, even the crew looked interested. Izuku meanwhile just had a deadpanned look. Now that makes sense, he thought dryly. Jewelry Bonnie. The announcer finally introduced as someone in the back jumped into the sky before descending and landing to reveal Bonnie herself. The crowd upon seeing this managed to go even higher in volume to scream encouragement towards Bonnie to show their support. However, this seemed to only annoy the pink-haired woman, who glared at the crowd. Would you all shut the hell up? I'm trying to concentrate here. The glutton screamed, making them all cower in fear, even the announcer. Seeing this, Bonnie let out a grin. Now then, she said as she turned back to the gator, who looked to be getting more and more angry. How should I cook you? She asked rhetorically, and as if understanding her, the beast roared and charged her with the crowd back up, not wanting to be caught in the middle of the fight. The only people that remained were the guards and the Devil Kings, wanting to see how this fight went. It's an easy win. All she has to do is turn it either into an infant or elderly before finishing it off. Izuku thought to himself, ready to watch the pink-haired woman active her devil fruit ability. Which is why it came as a surprise when, instead of doing that, she jumped into the air to avoid the beast lunging at her before delivering a brutal axe kick right to the creature's back. The force of the kick so strong it shattered not only the creature's scale but the ground too, as cracks appeared on the stones that made up the street. Or not. Izuku thought as he watched Bonnie dance around, nimbly dodge, and brutally counter the gal alligator. Sticking it in the back, head and legs, causing it to stumble, limp, and possibly being disorientated. Finally Bonnie seemed really to end it, and with one last quick punch to the neck, breaking it and killing the beast. Nobody made a sound, all wanted to cheer, but they clearly remembered what she said early. The woman in question just TSK. Idiots, when I told them to shut up it was so I can concentrate. She was just about to explain that when suddenly clapping could be heard, and looking around she saw it was coming from Izuku, who was walking towards her, a very impressed grin on his face. Now that was impressive, he told her before looking at the gator. You've definitely earned that, he said, gesturing towards the beast with his head while Bonnie grinned. You're DMN right, I did, she said, her arms crossed and a satisfied look on her face. Izuku smirked seeing this. Right, anyway, I'll be blunt, are you planning on going to the Grand Line anytime soon? He asked, getting a nod from the pinlet. May I ask why? He said, getting a scoff from the older woman. You sure do ask a lot of questions, don't you, kid? Before waving it off. There's something I really want to eat, and I just know it's there. she said, getting a raised eyebrow from Izuku, and can I ask what that is? Here Bonnie's grin returned 1,000-fold as she proudly shouted. I want to eat God, she shouted to the heavens, and even though Izuku had no idea what God was, but judging from the expressions from those gathered around, it was nothing to scoff at, if the disbelieving and paling faces were any indication, while his crew just looked around confused. Izuku was just about to ask what God was until finally what sounded like drunk laughter could be heard. Heh. Heh, stupid girl, God is nothing but a myth for young fools like you, just like the One Piece is for those DMN pirates. You dreamers are just getting in everyone's way by this point. An old nasally voice sounded as the crowd parted to reveal an old man clearly drunk off his butt, with the bottle in his hand, and the way he keeps swaying from foot to foot. Though his words seemed to have some merit as people started whispering to each other in quiet, unsure voices. Bonnie, seeing this, was just about to slap the old man when suddenly the drunk found himself lifted by the shirt high into the air. The man and crowd immediately clammed up, seeing the look in Izuku's eyes before he turned to Bonnie. Sorry about getting in your way. Usually I don't fight other people's fight for them, but considering he insulted my goal as well, I see it more as getting my dues too, he said, and Bonnie could see it in his eyes, a familiar anger, so with a grin and a nod she let Izuku deal with him. Seeing this, Izuku turned back to the drunk who had broken out in a cold sweat. So here's the thing, I'm currently putting together a crew together to go look for the One Piece, you know, the treasure that countless people have lost their lives trying to find. You see, I can't help but applaud them that even though they failed, they chased their dreams to the very end. So when I see someone like you who clearly has never chased a dream laugh at those who have and are, well, I can't let that go. The man could do nothing but sprout gibberish at this point as he tried to steam two words together. Well, anything else to say? He asked, only for the man to start foaming at the mouth, causing Izuku to drop him on the ground, where he lay on the ground unconscious. Not giving the drunk any more attention, he turned and walked back to Bonnie, who seemed to be expecting something. So here's the thing, we both seem to have crazy dreams, so why don't we do it together? Izuku asked. Come and join my crew and become our chief, and I'll do whatever I can to help you in your dream. Izuku offered, with Bonnie lowered her head in thought. In truth, it wasn't a bad offer, and Izuku was right, they both have crazy dreams, so he would be the best person to travel with. Taking a glance over to where Izuku had come from, she saw an orange-haired girl, looking her over like Bonnie was doing, while the tall blonde man conceived with the one in the mask, no doubt about her. They definitely don't look like common pirates, she thought before a grin came to her face. Then again, that's probably a good thing, she thought amusingly to herself before facing Izuku. Well, what I can say? You're right, us dreamers need to stick together, so count me in, Bonnie said, allowing Izuku to smile full force. Well then, Jewelry Bonnie, welcome to the Devil King Pirates, I'm the Captain Izuku Midoriya, Izuku said, fully introducing himself, while Bonnie's grin soon matched Izuku. Jewelry Bonnie, get ready to have your taste buds blasted off, Bonnie warned. The crowd couldn't take it anymore and burst into cheers, and in some cases tears, at seeing such a appealing scene. Incredible, what an absolute display of passion. Defending your dreams as well as the dreams of others before deciding to chase their dreams together. To think we would be able to witness a scene of such passion. The announcer yelled at the top of his lungs, tears steaming down his face. They sure do make a lot of noise, Izuku noticed idly as the rest of the crew came over to introduce themselves to their new crew member. While this was going on, Izuku went over and threw the gal alligator over his shoulder and walked over to Bonnie. Come on, you still need to pick out your ingredients to go with this thing, Izuku said, with Bonnie's smiley getting even bigger. Yeah, and now I have an even bigger reason to cook it, so expect some world-class dishes, she promised, missing Izuku's raised eyebrow at the fact this Bonnie was willing to share her food. Nami meanwhile was looking at Animal doubtful. I don't know, Bonnie, I doubt anyone could make something like this taste good. Line break. So good, Nami mooed as she took another taste of her soup and said, while the rest of the crew ate their own meals from the feast in front of them as they sat in the dining room. Bonnie, who had just finished an entire stick of meat, grinned smugly as she grabbed a burger before stuffing it in her mouth. What I'd tell you Nami, there's nothing I can't cook, she proclaimed before pouring herself another large bowl of soup. Well, at least we've got one good crew member today, he said while directing a glare at Law, who was eating a piece of fish from what Bonnie got to go with the gator. Hearing this, Law looked up with a smirk. Funny, you were singing quite a different tone when she first got here this morning, Law reminded him, causing Kid's scowl to grow epically when he saw the rest of the crew smile or giggle under their breath. Izuku simply chuckled as he bit into his garlala steak. Kid was not in a good mood when they meet up again, having to spend the whole day with Law and unable to have any good food. So when he got back with Law and saw Bonnie standing there just finishing setting up her stuff in the woman's quarters, he lost it, asking why they had another useless member joining them. This turned out to be a mistake, however, as a pink energy appeared in her hand, and a second later, after tapping Yudis on the air, he hunched over, suddenly becoming a little kid again and being unable to lift his metal arm, and was somewhat crushed underneath it until Bonnie turned him back to normal, which she refused to do until Kid apologized. Taking a gulp of his sake, "He's the world champion, of course he's had alcohol before," he spoke up before a fight could start. "So Bonnie, tell me about God, it must be incredible if it's considered a legend," Izuku requested, and this seemed to distract Bonnie and Kid. "So you want to know about God, huh? Well, that's actually quite the story." And so she told them. 1,000 years ago a devastating war started, lasting for 100 years and nearly destroyed the planet. The war was not due to politics, ideals, races, or economics, but something more primitive. The war was a struggle for food. In a world where travel was already difficult, and before they had the knowledge or means to preserve food or prepare plants and animals that were poisonous, too tough to cook, or were unable to be cooked for other reasons, food started becoming so scarce that countries just started fighting for whatever they could. That's when God appeared. No one knows what God is or what exactly happened when it appeared, but what is known is that when it did appear, the war ended, that the taste was so good it brought the battle-hardened country leaders to tears. After that the wars just stopped, just like that. After finishing her story, Bonnie grinned at seeing the stunned faces of her new crew. "Pretty amazing story, right?" she asked them, getting dumbfounded nods from the crew. "Thought so. Anyway, since them food lovers have been searching the world for any trace of God, but none have any luck," Bonnie revealed before gaining a determined look in her eyes. "But I know I'll be the one to find it, I just know it," Bonnie declared, a fire burning in her eyes as she looked at the assembled devil kings, each with their own smiles and smirks. "Eating God, huh? That's quite the interesting dream," Law commented with a lazy smirk before casually rolling his eyes over to Izuku. "Almost as interesting as our captain having multiple devil fruits," he finished idly. Everyone barring Bonnie, who started to choke in surprise, looked at Kid with either anger or exasperation at revealing that before Izuku could. Kid, seeing the looks, just scowled. It slipped out. He grunted as he looked at his plate like a petulant child, knowing he did something wrong. Bonnie, meanwhile, had recovered from her choking fit, marched right up to Izuku, confusion and frustration written all over her face. "Explain," she demanded, while Izuku mentally groaned. "So much for a realizing night. Line break." Meanwhile, a fleet of marine battleships sailed through the ocean, each one FO the standard ships having an 8 painted on the sail. In the front of the fleet stood the flagship. Instead of a normal cabin, it resembled more of a small castle with gold danes along the side, ending in a golden demon face as the figurehead. Inside the flagship a group of marines stood silent and ready for orders, each one not daring to make a move as a nervous sweat went down each one of them. Suddenly a deep, gluttonous voice full of arrogance bellowed throughout the cabin. "Eric! How long until we finally arrive?" The voice asked, sounding like a deep-voiced whiny child, causing the marines to look at the source and forcing themselves to hide the grimaces of disgust. The man was incredibly obese, looking like he couldn't even walk on his own. His girth so large that typical marine jacket would not fit him properly, with only his arms and back being covered. On his stomach was a tattoo of the marine symbol. On his face he had a thin, curved mustache, swirls on his cheeks, and his eyebrows seemed to be nothing more thsn 2 round, dark spots. He also wore an expensive-looking golden chain along with a tall blue marine hat. This was Commodore Nelson Royal, leader of the 8th branch, and currently he impatiently waiting for the return of one of his most trusted subordinates, Eric. He called again before scowling and hitting his chair with his fist in frustration. "Where the hell is he?" He growled to himself while his subroutines looked at each other unsure and nervous. "So sorry, Commodore, I was just making sure everything was set for our arrival, and before you ask, we should be there by early afternoon on the 4th day." A calm and somewhat suave man said as he entered the room. He was a slender man with a square-like face, long sharp fingernails and purple hair, curled upwards in the shape of the hook. He wore a gray blazer and pants and red-colored sides, and a purple-striped shirt underneath. On his chest he wore a golden brooch shaped like a bird wing. He also wore a pair of earrings with pearls hanging underneath them as well as black sunglasses. Upon hearing what Eric had to say, Nelson grinned again. "Excellent as always, Eric. Now how goes our little plan?" Nelson asked with Eric taking up a thinking pose. "No big catches yet, sir. You would think that the cooking festival would attract more pirates with bounties on them," Eric told his employer, who merely shrugged it off. "It doesn't matter if they have bounties or are even pirates, if we catch enough people and say they are pirates we should still be rewarded handsomely for it." Nelson thought, his mouth already salivating thinking about all the money his plan will get him. Eric just smirked amused. "An excellent plan, sir, but are you sure it's safe talking about this in front of others? Maybe it would be best if I just got rid of them," Eric suggested, raising his hand while indicating towards the Marines who remained frozen in fear. Luckily for them, Nelson just waved it. "There's no need for that, besides," he said as he smirked cruelly over to the Mares, who couldn't meet his gaze, too meek and browbeaten to say anything. Eric just smirked in amusement seeing this before turning around and leaving, having been dismissed by Nelson. As he was walking back to his cabin he couldn't help but smirk at what is to come. "Just you wait, you filthily pirates. Your sacrifice will be my ticket to the top, not that slothish, obese oaf," Eric thought to himself as he entered his cabin to prepare for his job ahead. To be continued. So a lot happened this chapter: ran into and beat Buggy, got to the food festival and meet and recruited both Law and Bonnie onto the crew. And before you say anything about Bonnie being out of character, I'm changing her character slightly as well as the lore of the world slightly, as evident by all the Toriko references in this chapter. Then next chapter will be the Marines' invasion and hopefully a few other things as well. I will say this thought: if anyone has read Naruto and is Galactic Pirates by Secreta Gentman 1 over on Fanficity.net, then you should have a pretty good idea of what's coming next. Also, next chapter Nami will get what she will be fighting with for the rest of the series. I was tempted to use something like her and use design, but since Gerd is now in One Piece I'm going to use something else. Don't really have anything else to say. Till next time.